The advantage of EVs is that once you get the electricity, you only have to pay for the materials once. And it's cheaper in theory to fuel up with electricity than with oil or natural gas. And the supply chains for that are simpler, right? That's kind of, from a security point of view, the attraction of green tech. There's a problem on the front end though. Conventional cars, because they get their energy from a separate source, the vehicles themselves from a material standpoint are pretty simplistic. But EVs are electric, far more complicated, order of magnitude more complicated to build and needing more materials. This kind of represents what you need, inputs for electric cars in the top versus conventionals. Here's the same data, but now for power generation. So you've got wind and solar at the top, coal and natural gas at the bottom. The issue is primarily one of exposure. A coal plant can have a roof, a solar panel cannot. You have to insure it against the elements, if you will, and that takes a lot more materials. Copper, nickel, cobalt, and zinc. Russia is one of the 3 largest suppliers in the world. We can't have globally available fossil fuels without the Russians at a reasonable price, and there's no way we can do the green transition without them. We don't have a patch here, folks. All right, a uniquely American problem. Just as we're a little agnostic about our chemicals and our energy, we're equally agnostic about our steel. We're very weird in that. Everyone else is a little paranoid about steel. So if they can't produce the iron ore themselves, they import it, they throw it into a blast furnace, usually powered by coal, and they get an intermediate product called pig iron, which they then go on to make finished steel products. Hot rolled is stuff that you're not going to see where you're primarily concerned about strength. So automobile frames or the beams in a building or rebars in a highway. Cold rolled is the pretty stuff. If there's anything on you, like your watch that's steel, that's cold rolled. If it's on your appliances and you can see it, it's cold rolled. If it's on your roof, cold rolled. We don't do it this way. For various reasons, the United States has very few smelters at all. So what we normally do is we import our hot rolled steel because that's easy to make. And for the cold rolled stuff, we import pig iron. And then we run it through our facilities and we make the highest value add steel on the planet, and we export a lot of that. 3/4 of global pig iron supplies come from Russia and Ukraine. The Russian facilities are under sanction. The Ukrainian facilities lost power because, you guys remember that nuclear power plant that has been in the news that the Russians have occupied? That is the sole source of electricity for the entire Ukrainian steel sector. It's just gone. We get 2/3 of our pig iron from these 2 countries. So we are now seeing steel price appreciation in addition to all the other inflationary pressures that are out there. All right, let's talk about one tiny little issue before we go to the big stuff. Chairman Xi has created history's tightest cult of personality. He has prosecuted or imprisoned or exiled everyone in China that is capable of independent thought. He has shot the messenger so many times, literally, that no one will bring him information any longer. Not information they're afraid he won't like, information. When Putin lied to his face a week before the war started, saying that he had no intention of starting a war, the people in the back of the room had to just be horrified because they knew they couldn't challenge Putin. When the power outages started last May, it's obvious from policy in China that Xi didn't find out about it until September. We didn't get our first policy to deal with it until February. COVID's a fun one. We're in the South here. I'm going to go out on a limb and guess that there's a diversity of opinions on COVID. Some of us are part of the vaccine crowd. Some of us think that natural immunity is the only way to go. And I think if we're all being honest with one another, or at least with ourselves at home in the dark with the lights out and the doors locked, that the other side has some points that are worth consideration. But neither of these are options in China. The Chinese system has been sufficiently successful in keeping COVID away from the general population that no one has natural immunity. And we now have more than enough data to prove that the Chinese vaccines don't work. If COVID were to get fast and loose in the population, you would have 2 to 5 million deaths a month for at least the first 6 months. And in a one-man cult of personality rule, that is a regime-ending event. So lockdowns are all they can do. So we have seen city after city go into lockdown. Doesn't matter the impact on the export market or the manufacturing supply chain system, it just doesn't matter. Lockdowns are the only way that they can go. And at the pace that they're going, they're not going to get a meaningful vaccine within the next 2 years. This is our new normal. This is the best case scenario. Because there's been a lot of talk about the Russians shifting some of their energy exports to China, but China is actually the country that's going to suffer the most from the Ukraine war, with the obvious mentions of Ukraine and Russia themselves. Because most of the crude and most of the natural gas that currently flows from Russia south to China, it's all in eastern Siberia. And every single one of those fields has no history back before 1992 because the Soviets did not have the technology to develop them. It took the super majors and the Western services firms to bring that online, and they are all now gone. So we don't know how long they can remain in operation, whether it's 6 months, a year, 2 years, 3 years, but we know they're all going to zero. And the infrastructure that takes energy from Western Siberia west into Russia has no physical connection to the infrastructure in Eastern Siberia that goes south to China. You're talking about 2,000 miles plus of gaps in unpopulated territories where you'd have to build it. Assuming they can get Western assistance in finance and tech and construction, that's a 10-year project that will cost in excess of $100 billion. Even the Chinese can't really speed that up very much. So China is looking to lose all of its land-based fuel transfers from the Russian space. So we're looking at 3 million in Eastern Siberia going away and 5 million in Western Siberia going away. That's 8% of global markets. You're talking $250 oil before the Americans do anything. And then finally, there's Taiwan. Everything that the Chinese thought that they thought was true about war has been proven wrong. Because they've been modeling their Taiwan stuff off of a lot of the Russian stuff. I mean, the Chinese aren't dumb. They're using China as kind of a canary in the coal mine, a test case to see how everyone reacts. So they thought going against Taiwan would be easy. But they certainly thought going against Ukraine would be easier because you can literally walk to Ukraine from Moscow. Yeah, it's a bit of a swim to get to Taiwan. So all of a sudden they know the war is not going to be easy. They assumed that no one would do anything, that no one would help Taiwan. Well, that's out the window. They assumed that no one would punish Russia because it was too important to international economics. Say what you will about the Russian economy, but it is a massive exporter of food and energy products. China is the world's largest importer of both. If you take the sanctions that are against the Russians today and put them on the Chinese, you have industrial collapse and famine in less than 6 months, and probably more than 500 million dead from famine within 3 years. So normally, I would say the Chinese would look at this like, okay, crap. Everything we've planned on for 45 years is wrong. We got to start over. But we have a one-man cult of personality state that has systematically purged everyone in the country capable of independent thought. This is normally where you take your smart people and throw them to a back room with some pizza and say, give me a plan B. But Xi has shot all those people. And so China is slamming its head into the wall over and over and over until something cracks. And I don't think that thing is going to be Taiwan.